Hey everyone, Harry here with an account of the first morning of testimony by one Michael Cohen in the New York versus Trump case. So there was a sense, I was in the courtroom all day. There was a sense of electricity when they called him. They called him right off the bat. Trump had a pretty big entourage with him when he entered. Eric Trump, Alina Habba, Boris Epstein, and a senator or two. But anyway, they got right down to business. And, with Cohen, they had done quite a bit to corroborate in advance his various details. So that was, in a sense, going to be, as he related them, going to just be sort of mental check marks for the jury. Then there were some things he was going to have to carry alone. He got to those by and large in the afternoon, and we'll talk about them in another tape. But for the prosecution, an important strategic call is, when do you do what's called pulling the sting? That is advancing to give Cohen a chance to explain and humanize, and not such a antagonistic, confrontational way, hid the various skeletons in his closet, which are, pretty distinct and worrisome. He's got many criminal convictions. One includes for basically lying. And there are other things that we know they'll be coming after him on. So how would he do about that, et cetera? Okay, so they call him. New haircut, gray suit, white shirt, lightish tie. And he is very sort of calm and professional on the stand from the get-go. They decide to start with his biographical background a little bit. His dad, a Holocaust survivor who becomes a doctor, asked about going to law school. He said he didn't want to go to law school, but everybody in his family are doctors and lawyers, and his grandmother basically told him he had to. He was sort of interested in actually business. And they talked about how he acquired certain holdings and the like. Then pretty early on, they said, did you come to work for Donald Trump? Can you point him out in court? And he actually doesn't have a direct line of sight. So he had to sort of stand up, point around, and look to identify some item of clothing that he was wearing, excuse me. And then, so the next chunk was his 10 years, the sort of golden years, in the Trump organization. A fairly good or interesting story about starting out. He had done some work. Trump just had gotten to know him and was just giving him projects. And he had done a fairly big one involving bankruptcy and the like, and sent a bill finally, which he hadn't been doing, for $100,000. Trump called him in and basically offered him a job, but stiffed his law firm, didn't pay it. He said to Cohen, you want to get fired on your first day? And Cohen literally never went back to his law firm. He'd say there, Trump had somebody gather his stuff. And from then on, he was Trump's personal fixer, as it was. They said, would that be a fair term? And he said, yes, I think it would be. And he was to hear him tell it, he really loved the job. He thought it was exciting. He was very sort of loyal. There were different kinds of things that came up. He was chuffed at being Trump's, lawyer. He had the office sort of right next to him. And he talked about times where he browbeat people. He talked about times where he lied, including to the press. In general, on all that stuff, he was really splendid all day. When it came time for having to cop to things that they're going to try to eviscerate him on cross, he had the exact right attitude, which was just to simply say it and move on. And here's a little preview from the afternoon, but this is the best example of the day. You may have heard tell that, and they're definitely going to come after him with the idea that he wanted to get a big job at the White House. And one of them that he thought he should maybe get was chief of staff. And they asked him about that. This is on direct. And he said flat out, look, I didn't really want that job. I didn't think I was even qualified for it. But after all the work I had done, I wanted my name to be in there. It was an ego thing, which seemed just right to me. He gave a solid explanation and said it was his ego. And, that was, just straightforward, and then moved on. The morning in general was quite rapidly paced. And they, but Cohen in particular, his answers were not too long, and he was very well prepared. And by that, I mean, yes, he had all the content down, but more than that, he basically listened, or appeared to listen. That this would have been drummed into him. Don't just anticipate the question. Listen, wait a second, give a response. There were a few times where he didn't quite understand and said so, but it was a natural conversation where he seemed really responsive, and he was so well prepared that it seemed spontaneous, if you see what I mean. If you work with somebody again and again, and he was there for 25 times with the DA, after getting down the content, you would really make them want to look natural, and he had done his homework and did it well. All right, so he talked about his different roles in the Trump organization. He was the renegotiation guy. Trump comes off as a total tough bastard, but he's liking it. At one point, he talks about feeling on top of the world when he got all these people to renegotiate it way down, and then there were two who wouldn't renegotiate at all. They didn't pay him, let them try to sue him. That's Trump's MO, and Cohen could be his sort of attack dog there, and it was excellent. Trump has an open door policy, so he was in quite a bit. Trump, it came out, as everyone has said, is a micromanager. Was he a micromanager? Yes, ma'am. He would, give ma'ams to Susan Hoffinger, who was giving the testimony, or asking the questions for the DA. But again, yes, ma'am, not like, oh, was he a micromanager? Or let me tell you about it. Just, yes, ma'am. Did you at times lie for him? I did. Why? I needed to perform the task. The only thing on my mind was accomplishing the task to make him happy. And, it really just kind of played credible and very, believable. That's the sort of atmosphere within the Trump world. And he had this special role in it. He felt like a big shot. All right. I guess the sort of critical point in the story then comes when Trump announces he's running for president. The issue of women coming up, there's going to be a lot of women coming forward. Trump tells him. They have this meeting with Pecker at the Trump Tower, and we know about that through Pecker, but basically Pecker says, I will get good stories for Trump in there. I'll get bad stories for other candidates in there. And he will suppress, stories about Trump that could be bad. But they went through some of the nasty stories about Hillary Clinton and Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, et cetera. So all the way through, he is this general fixer, not just law stuff, dealing with media. He's always reporting to Trump. Trump always wants to know what's going on. Trump just says unbelievable, fantastic, etc. when things go well. And now we move to the really beginning of the story as Pecker told it, which is the first negative story. It turns out to be a false story, in fact, from Dino the doorman. And he just told, handle it. Make sure the story doesn't get out. And Cohen works with the AMI folks, Pecker and Dylan Howard, to in fact, do the catch and kill. And they do that. It's his idea to put in this liquidated damages provision that says if Dino or whoever would be violates it, he's got to pay $1 million. That would be unenforceable, by the way, but that's the kind of over-aggressive lawyer that he was. They went through and showed, really how accessible Trump was to him, or how often when there was a problem, he could get him on the phone either by walking in the office or through the people who he knew were with him at the time. Maybe it was Hope Hicks, maybe it was Keith Schiller. At one point, it was Melania. But when he needed to find him, he was able to. All right. The first sort of big story, and we're still in the morning, was Kathy McDougall, and we go through the entire narrative that has where he basically negotiates out this $150,000 payment, and Trump basically stiffs David Pecker. Although it's up in the air and maybe he's going to do it, and he keeps talking about it, and eventually, to cut to the end and chase here, eventually one of her covers makes so much money for Pecker that he says to them, "Don't worry about it," and eats the $150,000. It is, though, in the context of the McDougall case, that he tapes this call. He says it's the only call he ever taped with Trump. And he explained why. It was one detail that struck me a little bit hard to swallow. But there weren't many like that. And who's to say? But he said the reason he taped it was because he wanted Pecker to know that Trump was going to pay him back, so that Pecker would remain loyal, because some time had passed and Trump, who's a deadbeat, hadn't paid back the $150,000. So he does a tape where he has basically this sort of cryptic thing that says we've got to start a company. An important thing here is they didn't want to do this through any kind of Trump entity. So they wanted to have a holding company that would own the rights to McDougall's story. After Pecker had paid for it, AMI owned the rights to McDougall's story. But anyway, that he tapes a call, and it shows Trump's knowledge, and it's important. Trump says, "What do we got to pay? $150,000?" And Trump suggests cash, which Cohen rejects because you need some paperwork, some holding company that shows they have the rights to the life story. So that's inculpatory, but he says it wasn't to cover his own ass, but rather to be able to play it back to Pecker. A little bit odd, but anyway, that was the story. Okay, so he goes through it. And the big quote from Trump: "What do we have to pay for this? $150." There was at the time another concern, which is that Pecker was under consideration for a different job, the head of Time Inc., and he supposedly had like a drawer full of nasty stuff involving Trump, and they were wondering how to take kind of control of that as well. And that was going to be part of the deal with paying Pecker. In the event, Pecker wound up not being considered, and also said he went through the stuff. There was really nothing much there. And at this point, we were, we just received the tape. That was about the morning, and what was starting next was the stormy situation when we hit lunchtime. But I was, remarked at the time that it was all pretty low-key, undynamic. That is, the prosecution didn't try when big things happen to, sometimes you can ask something slowly, or, really ask them to repeat it or raise your voice. They were just very level, and he in turn was very level, very calm, as I say, seemed very focused, listening well, really very solid performance. And that was the morning. When we went to the afternoon, there was some new stuff, and stuff that I think Cohen alone will have to carry. We'll see if he can do that. but the basic sort of first exposition was solid, low-key, undynamic, professional, and fairly quick. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.